Szanowni Państwo, i nadeszła ta oczekiwana
wiekopomna
chwila. Już za chwilę na tej scenie po raz pierwszy raz w Polsce wystąpi król Doliny Krzemowej, twórca The Startup Owner Manual.
Nikt inny, tylko Bob Dorf. Bob, zapraszamy.
Zapraszamy.
Welcome. Warmly welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Great to be here. It's quite a royal morning. First the president, and then this supposed king of Silicon Valley. I feel more like a private in the startup army than a king. And the real royalty here on this royal morning is the entrepreneurs, the fabulous, energetic Polish entrepreneurs I've had the privilege and the delight of talking to and meeting and hearing about your great ideas all day yesterday and on to today. So who is this crazy American guy and what's he doing up here? I've been doing startups since 1972, before just about everybody in this room was born, almost everybody. And at the age of 22, I went home to my middle-class parents and told them I was quitting this fabulous job that in today's US dollars paid me about $200,000 a year. Why? Not because I wanted to be rich, not because I wanted to be famous, never quite did either of those, but because I wanted to be my own boss and chart my own destiny and do something that was mine. And believe me, it's a much better reason to do a startup than to do it to get rich, because the odds of you getting rich are very, very, very slim. So from the age of 22 till the ripe old age of 64, 7 startups, 2 home runs, 2 base hits, 2 okay, and 3 right into the toilet. Since then, 30 investments in startups that I've either invested in or coached or advised, 7 IPOs, 6 right into the toilet, and everything in between. But the thing I hope gives me the most credibility to be talking to you today are those 3 fleece vests that I own. You remember when you were kids, mom and dad went to London on vacation, and when they came back, you got a t-shirt that said, Mommy and Daddy went to London, and all I got was this lousy t-shirt. Well, 3 times I got one of these vests that sort of says the same thing. On the front, it has a beautiful company logo, usually in color, because startups always spend too damn much money. And on the back, it says, I invested $1 million of my own money in this startup, and all I got was this lousy vest. And the reason that story to me is so important is we learn so much more from our failures than we do from our successes. When we succeed, we tell ourselves how smart we were, we caught the market right, we had the right people, we did everything right, and we hurt ourselves patting one another on the back. But when you fail, as most serial entrepreneurs will, at least once, if not 2 or 3 times, the learning from that failure is what helps you really move forward. And the odds against your success are overwhelming. The worst statistic I've ever seen suggests that about 3 of 1,000 startups that actually get some kind of funding ever make it to an IPO. Most of us know the statistic that 95% of all startups fail. Why is that? Well, let me give you one more math lesson, and then we'll move on. Anybody in the room able to multiply 80 times 50 times 5? Anybody? 80 times 50 times 5, okay? The number is 20,000, and that is the approximate number of hours you should or will devote to doing everything you can do to make your startup successful. That's 5 years of 80-hour weeks, which in Silicon Valley would rank you as a slacker or somebody who's not working very hard. In the Startup Owner's Manual and the Customer Development methodology, which my partner and co-author Steve Blank has been working on for 13 years in the Valley, suggests that you buy an insurance policy. Yes, a copy of our book, now in Polish, but much more important, you buy an insurance policy for 5 or 10% of those 20,000 hours. If you are going to work that hard, and hopefully do it because you love it and you love the excitement and the challenge and being the boss, if you're going to work that hard, wouldn't you like to take 5% or 10% of those 20,000 hours, the first 1,000 or 2,000 hours, and make sure that the startup you're building has the greatest possible potential and that the idea at the beginning of your startup is as strong as it can possibly be? And the way you do that is by talking to the only people whose opinions matter, the people who are going to give you money for your product or your service, your customers. Because today, technology is so powerful and so rich that you can build almost anything other than my 2 favorite products I'm still looking for, the take a pill tonight, lose 20 pounds in the morning pill, and the time machine pill, because I'd still like to be 12 years old again, because I'm 12 on the inside and just a little bit older on the outside. And most of those startups that fail don't fail because they couldn't build the technology or write the code or build the prototype. They fail because they don't find customers. So if you think about it, when you sit down on day one of your startup, too many founders assume that they know what the customer problem is, and therefore they know exactly what to build in order to solve that problem. But that is fundamentally impossible, because on day one you have no customers. How could you possibly know what their problems are? And if you don't know who they are and what their problems are, how are you going to know what features to build into your product? And if you think about it, a startup is really not a business at all. A startup is a temporary organization, usually filled by crazy people, each one of whom has 2 of these big balls, whether they're a boy or a girl, and they are going to go on a search. It's a temporary organization designed to search for a business model, okay? Now, customers don't read your business plan. If they did, life would be so much easier, right? They're pushing their shopping cart through the supermarket, and there's a can of peas, and the business plan is stapled to it, and it says, you will buy 6 cans of these peas once a week. You'll save 2 to give as Christmas gifts. You'll use 2 in a stew, and you'll serve 2 with dinner. But unfortunately, customers don't read the plan, and they don't do what we want them to do anyway. And if you look at one of the hundreds of examples of people who wrote brilliant business plans, Webvan, for example, raised over $800 million and was bankrupt less than 2 years after somebody wrote the first check for their business plan. Because while they were doing everything that the business plan said, nobody stopped to notice that the customers weren't doing what the business plan said. It said 70% of them would purchase their groceries home delivered by Webvan every week. Well, that number was more like 14%. And the average order size would increase from $70 to $100 to $150, and it went the other way. By the time Webvan was bankrupt, it had gone through $3 billion US, because nobody stopped to ask the customer what they thought of their idea. And so those first 1,000 hours you spend at your startup, you don't spend it doing anything. You spend it on a search. If you're a big company, you can execute. You know who the customers are, you know what their products are, you know what your competitors are, where they're sold, what they charge. As a startup, you know none of that. And the customer development methodology is all about, while your development team is down here building your product, Your customer discovery team is up here learning from the customers what they want, where they want to buy it, what features they want and don't want. Feeding that information real time into the development team so that by the time the product is ready, you've done a search that tells you where to sell it, what to charge for it, how your product compares to Oracle or Intuit or any other competitive products in your area. And you go out and you search the only place that matters. You get out of the building and you talk to customers because their opinions are the only ones that have any impact on your success. And so instead of spending 3 months locked in a room writing this beautiful business plan, 50 pages, beautifully formatted, 5 spreadsheets in the back, somehow the last spreadsheet, always the far right column, gets to revenue, $100 million, profit, $17, $18, $20 million. Why is that? Because that's what a venture capitalist wants to see in order to invest. But business plans are 98% fairy tale, 2% fact. Usually the facts are found in the competitive set or in the market analysis that says this is a $2 billion market. If we only get 1% of it, boy, are we going to be rich. Why waste that 3 months writing fiction? Start instead with a single sheet of paper. What Alexander Osterwalder, brilliant Swiss PhD, conceived this 6 or 7 years ago. He called it a business model. And Osterwalder suggests that instead of taking the 3 months to write this great work of fiction, put down your best ideas about the 9 elements that together make your startup into a business, okay? In Bogota, Colombia, where I work quite a bit only with entrepreneurs whose products can walk right by a customs sniffer dog, because lots of entrepreneurs in Colombia do other things, in 8 weeks with 25 teams of entrepreneurs, by the 8th week, 9 of those entrepreneurial teams had customer revenue. One of them had $55,000 in revenue. Another had 315 paying customers. In the same 8 weeks, many of you spend writing your business plan. They did their business model canvas the first morning, and they went out, talked to customers, figured out what customers wanted and didn't want, and built themselves a business on the fly, testing every step of the way, rather than waiting till week 8 or week 12 to go out and say, okay, let's see if anybody buys this thing that we've worked on for 12 weeks or a year or whatever in a lead-lined room where no customers could ever enter. So let's talk just a little bit about this business model. The first box, the value proposition, is one of the 2 hearts of the canvas. What is my product? How does it compare to competitors in my space? What is the problem I'm solving for customers or the need I'm filling for customers? And why are they going to rush to me and grab it out of my hands? Second, customer segment. Who is the smallest, narrowest, tightest group of customers who are going to be most excited about my value proposition? Because if I can't figure that out and get to them, I'm never going to sell to thousands or tens of thousands of people. Who are they? Why will they buy from me? When you figure those 2 out, you're at step 1 of success, or on the road to success. Product market fit. I have a value proposition. I have a pitch. And I know exactly who the customers are that I think are going to buy it. And I've shown it to them, and guess what? They're interested. Step 1 of a multi-step process to building a successful business. You've done this with no money. You've gotten this feedback with no product. We'll talk about that a little bit more a little later. Step 3, number 4 here, customer relationships. How am I going to get my customers? Once I get them, how will I keep them? And then how will I grow them? 2 entirely different ways. First, this slideshow is in a bit of a hurry, excuse me. First, I grow them by selling them more, selling them the same product more often, selling them other products. And second, and more important, especially for most entrepreneurs who don't have money for television ads and, big Google AdWords campaigns, how do I get my customers to refer me to other customers? Viral marketing, the most honest, cost-effective marketing there is. It's honest because you have friends telling friends, buy this product, I love it, you will too. Get, keep, and grow customers. This is the most expensive box on the canvas and the death of most startups. Not testing this and figuring it out months before you're ready to launch the product. In the mid-90s, during the internet bubble, we were throwing millions of dollars at network television because, well, we got to get customers, and it was easy to raise the money. The Super Bowl of 1998 had almost $100 million of television advertising in the United States alone from dot-coms, companies like Pets.com that has been gone for more than a decade, and many others that were throwing money at get customers because they had the money and because they didn't think about it until they had built their product and said, gee, now we have to figure out how we're going to get customers. And they wrote chapter 11 in the marketing history of many of those companies. When you can figure out those 3 things, who's my customer, what's my value proposition, how I'm going to find them, then take a deep breath, fire the accountant, and do a very rough cocktail napkin envelope revenue model. Can this business eventually make money? If it costs me $2 to get a customer and the customer gives me $10 or $12, it probably can. If it costs you $10 or $12 to get a customer and the product is $2 or $3, obviously you have a problem. And so when you finish working your way through your guesses, what you have is a canvas full of nothing more than your best guesses of what will make this a successful business. When we teach this at universities, which Steve Blank and I do all over the world, we call them hypotheses, because parents are paying many, many thousands of dollars to send their kids to school. They need to learn big words. But changing those guesses or hypotheses into facts is where the canvas takes a back seat and where customer development takes over. You start to talk to customers very often within a week of founding your company. You get out of the building and you talk to them yourself. You don't hire market research people. You don't send interns to do this. You, the founder, have to do this yourself, because you have to watch people falling asleep at the sales pitch for something that you were sure was really terrific and wonderful and everybody was going to be excited about. You have to hear the customer say, well, I kind of like it, but if it could add and subtract and there was a little keypad over here, I'd buy 100 of them, and I think I'd be able to get my company to buy 1 for each of the 20,000 employees. If a junior person hears that, or hears 50 people in a row say, this is a dumb product, I'd never buy it, are they going to tell it to you, the CEO, the founder, just that way? Probably not. You need to hear it yourself. You need to see people's pupils dilate, see them get excited about your product, or see their pupils disappear as their eyes close, playing with this website you've spent 3 months developing and is fundamentally uninteresting to them. So when you get out of the building, you're in step 1 of the customer development process. It's a 4-step process. We're only going to talk about the first 2 because the first 2 deliver 90% of the horsepower for startups. Customer discovery, you get your canvas done, then you get out of the building 2 different times. Entrepreneurs hate what I'm about to say, but it is so important and so powerful. The first time you get out of the building, you go and you talk to 50, 60, 80 customers. You don't talk about your product at all, not a word. You're going out to see if customers have a problem that your product will solve. Is it a problem they have every day, twice a day, 3 times a day, or once or twice a year? Because if they have it once or twice a year, it's probably not a great market opportunity because you're going to need millions and millions and millions of customers. If it's a problem they have every day, or they're at risk of losing their wife, their money, their girlfriend, their mistress, their job, all of a sudden your product is a lot more important. So the first time you go out, what you're probing for is there a market for this product I have? And the reason entrepreneurs hate this is entrepreneurs love to go out and do stuff. They like to come home to their boyfriend or girlfriend or husband or wife, say, wow, I made 14 sales calls today. I got 4 orders. We are doing great. And the rush to do that doesn't give you time to see if you have the 3 key ingredients of any long-term successful startup. Is what you're doing repeatable? If you can find 20 customers today, can you find 30 tomorrow and 40 the next day and 50 the week after that? Is it scalable? Can it go beyond Poland to Eastern Europe, to Western Europe, to the US, to Asia? And is it profitable? Repeatable, scalable, and profitable. Once you've found that you've got a market, then you go back out of the building a second time and say, gee, you told me you had a problem organizing your business expenses and submitting them on time. We have an idea for a product. Let me show you a little bit about this product and get your reaction to it. Tell me if you think it solves the problem. Again, you don't yet have a working product. Your working product could be 2 or 3 or 4 months away because you want to learn now what you can do to make this product better, more compelling, more interesting to customers before the software or product development is complete. When you get done with that, you decide, okay, are we ready now to move to step 2? Did we get enough consistent positive feedback from the people we thought were going to be our customers to be confident that there's a bunch of them out there and they like our value proposition, and every time I show this to a customer, or every 10 times I show this to a customer, not necessarily 10 of them will buy, but 2 or 3 or 1.6 for every 10 will buy, which tells me that my business is repeatable and scalable. That if it's 1.6 out of 10 instead of 5 out of 10, you have to make sure you can afford the additional number of salespeople or marketing dollars that will be required to reach more of those customers. But once you feel that you've gotten enough consistent feedback that this type of customer likes your value proposition, then you move to step 2, customer validation. And customer validation is gentle, steady scaling. Go from spending $50 on Google AdWords to spending $500 and then $800 and then $1,000 to make sure that what worked when you were spending $50 holds up when you spend 5 times as much or 10 times as much. If you sent 1,000 emails and you got 50 responses, do you get 500 responses when you send 10,000 emails? Everything I'm talking about can be tested in small batches without venture capital, with money you can take out of your bank account or your credit card or borrow from friends and family, because raising venture capital, even in the United States, is a huge time waster for entrepreneurs. By the way, I didn't mention that my 7 businesses, none of them raised any outside capital. The first one, I was this crazy 22-year-old, nobody would invest in me, so why bother anyway? And by the third, I had enough of my own money to seed the ideas and, make sure that if anybody lost money on them, I lost money on them. But as you start to move across this sort of spectrum, you start to spend more and more money. But when you get, and I would walk over there except I'll kill myself, when you get to the end of customer validation, you have proven with very little money that you have a repeatable, scalable, profitable business. Said another way, you've created sort of a slot machine where I put 100 zlotys in the top and it bounces around and it makes some noise and there's colors and music and whatever, and 110 zlotys come out of the bottom. It doesn't work every single time, but 8 times out of 10, I put 100 zlotys in the top, 110 come out of the bottom. Now imagine how that sounds to an investor, right? Over here, at the beginning of customer discovery, you're a bunch of bright Polish engineers with great credentials, a great resume, and an idea. Hey, venture capitalist, I'd like a lot of money because I am sure my idea is going to work well, and if it's a $2 billion market, and if we only get 1% of it, boy, are we going to be rich. And the venture capitalist says, well, what's standing between you and getting rich? Well, we need money. Oh, so I'm between you and great Mark Zuckerberg wealth. Well, yeah, kind of. Okay, then I guess I decide the terms of my investment, so I want half the company, because it's nothing without me. You don't have very much of an argument, right? But after you've built this little machine that turns 100 zlotys into 110 zlotys most of the time, imagine that same conversation with that same venture capitalist. We've created this machine that turns 100 zlotys into 110 most of the time. We just need a pile of zlotys to put in the top of the machine so we can print more zlotys. Think of how much better your equity deal is and how much equity you have preserved for yourself and your founding team, as opposed to giving it all away early in the conversation. And what you have done for yourself and for that investor, you haven't by any means guaranteed the success of your startup, because there is no such thing. If you memorize our book and sleep with it under your pillow, I still guarantee you that there is no assurance of your startup's success. What Steve Blank and I tried to do with the Startup Owner's Manual is to put between the 2 covers 500 stupid startup mistakes that we both know well because we made them personally in doing 15 startups between us over a combined 75 years of crazy startup life. The more you can not make those mistakes, what we do guarantee is that this methodology and using customer feedback wisely reduces the failure rate. And the failure rate is so enormous that if we can help you cut it by 20 or 25%, we hope that between that, your hard work, your coaches, your mentors, your advisors, improves your chances for success, which again are by no means sort of guaranteed. So where does this customer discovery begin? How do you talk to a customer, right? The first time you're only talking about the problem. You don't need a demo. But the second time, how do you talk to a customer about a product that doesn't exist? Because you're doing this in the second or third or fourth week of your startup. Most of the time, the product isn't done. You go out and you show a customer what we call the minimum viable product. This is like the first 25% of a working prototype. Why do you show them this half-assed thing that doesn't really work? Sometimes it's as simple as a bunch of screenshots that explain what the product will do. Well, if you clicked on this button, wipe to the next slide, this is what you would see. And if you want to change something here, wipe, here's the way you would do that. Because you get so much better product feedback when customers react to a real product, even if it doesn't work, even if it's made out of chewing gum and styrofoam and duct tape, something they can touch and react to. Why are the knobs on two different sides? It would be so much easier if they were together. Hello, product development, move the knobs, right? Why is it so big? I'd like to put it in my jacket pocket. Hello, product development, shrink the box. The more of that you can learn before you launch, the greater your chances of success or the lower your chances of failure. For some businesses, creating a minimum viable product is really hard. Imagine if you were building a new jet airplane. Hello, Mr. Customer, please come take a ride on my minimum viable product. It works most of the time. I want you to fly with me. It's usually okay. Probably not going to happen. Imagine if you were going to build a huge e-commerce site, like two young entrepreneurs in New Jersey in the United States did with diapers.com. They had just sold a small startup. They had a little bit of money. They were kicking around the house trying to figure out what they were doing next. And each of them had a young child who was, they would have a lot of play dates, and the kids would, poop on the carpet and talk to each other and do whatever, toddlers do. And the dads would talk about what's the next business we're going to do together. And they said, the way we buy diapers is really broken. We never know whether we're getting a good price or not. You can never find exactly the one you want. The kid always runs out of diapers at 9 o'clock on a rainy night, and you're home alone. You got to put the kid under one arm, the big box of diapers under the other arm, walk to the car in the rain. Really, there's got to be a better way. Why don't we buy the URL diapers.com, which was available cheap, and let's try this value proposition. Absolutely guaranteed the best price available anywhere. Free delivery to your door tomorrow morning if you order by 5 p.m. Elegant, fabulous 24-hour customer service. Return anything if you bought it by mistake, the wrong size, the wrong shape, whatever, return it at our expense, no questions asked. That was their value proposition. The diapers were the same Loves and Pampers and every different size and every different age, and 24s and 12s and 48s, delivered the next day for free. How would you test that business, right? You'd say, well, gee, I need a warehouse. I need at least 3 of every size. I need the Dora the Explorer diapers. I need the Mickey Mouse diapers in 3 months, 6 months, overnight, 12 month, 30 pound. I need a massive amount of inventory. I need mailing equipment, shipping equipment. Probably need to raise $1 million or $2 million just to try it. These two guys didn't want to use, they each only made $1 million or $2 million. They didn't want to bet the ranch, so they built an MVP of diapers.com, a simple website from Wix.com for $7 a month, and their value proposition in bold letters, guaranteed lowest price anywhere, any diaper, any size, any pack, delivered to your door for free tomorrow, guaranteed, or your money back. They put up this website, and they listed every diaper, and they listed the prices at, Toys R Us, at, Walmart, and other big drugstore chains in the U.S. They said, these are the other prices, this is our price, and if you find a better price, we'll beat it. They put up the website. They started emailing and Facebooking all their friends, many of whom, because they were the same age, had babies and kids. and needed diapers. And within hours, they were buried in orders, right? People going to the site, looking around saying, wow, this is the best way to buy diapers I could ever imagine, right? The only problem was these guys didn't have any diapers. In the United States, and I'm sure here in Poland, when you take money from people and you don't have any product, you get to do your next startup in prison, selling cigarettes or chewing gum or whatever they sell in prison these days. So every day at 4:30 in the afternoon, the two founders and their two wives each got into a truck or an SUV, and they went out and they bought all the inventory to fill all the orders. They bought it at retail, and they raced back to the house, world headquarters, no warehouse, put a shipping label on each one, and by 6:29, they were at the loading dock for the freight company. The deadline for next day delivery was 6:30. And they lost money on every single order. They bought it at retail, sold it at the best price anywhere, lost some money there. Then they shipped it for free, lost more money there. Then they managed the website and the call center for customer support. They were losing money on every single order. But in that month, they found product market fit. We have found people who are crazy about getting a good deal on diapers delivered to their home. And we know exactly who they are. They're people like us with young kids, and we know where to find them, the mommy blogs and all the websites. But no warehouse, no inventory, and they, one of the beautiful things about web commerce is they got the money from the customer before they went to Walmart and bought the diapers. Nice little benefit. But they very quickly discovered product market fit. Customers love our idea. And then you go to that box on the bottom on the right that I talked about briefly, revenue model. Well, gee, how are we going to make money on this eventually? And it was obvious. First, they could buy the diapers wholesale instead of at stores. Second, they could get volume discounts from the freight company. But even more important, people who buy diapers buy lots of other things, not once in a while, but every week. Infant formula, wipes, juice boxes, lots of, Q-tips, all kinds of crap that you need to keep your baby happy. And they could sell that stuff at enough margin to quickly make every order profitable. So it's a minimum viable product. The website barely worked. Nothing else worked at all the way you would envision it. And in 2 months, they said, wow, this is a business. Let's get a warehouse. Let's buy the diapers wholesale. Let's get the freight contracts. And let's take every dollar we have and plow it into this business because we have tested it, and with almost no money, we have found magic. We have found product market fit. 3 years later, they sold this little business, started in their living room, to a company that had failed to sell diapers successfully 3 times. Shame on you. Amazon.com had to buy diapers.com for $1.2 billion because they tested every piece of their business model and got it right before they spent all the money. And if I leave you today with one thought, that's it. Test, test, test. Get feedback from the only people who matter, your customers. And if you don't get it right the first time, do it again. And if you don't get it all right the second time, do it a third. And do it as inexpensively and as fast and as smartly as you can. It has no promise of a $1.2 billion exit, but it improves your chances for success dramatically. I won't tell you these other stories. Zappos.com did the exact same thing. Their inventory would, buy any shoe available in the United States, delivered to your door the next day. Their warehouse was 30 shoe retailers in Las Vegas, where Tony Hsieh, the founder, went in and took a picture of every single shoe they had. That was his inventory. And when he sold a pair of Manolo Blahnik size 7 blues, he raced to that store, bought them for a 20% discount, ran home, put them in a Zappos box, ran to the post office, and sent them off. He, I guess, didn't do as well as the diaper guys. He only sold to Amazon.com for $900 million, and that business is continuing to thrive and to grow. And it was started without inventory, without a warehouse, with a minimal marketing budget. Things you could do on your bank card, credit card limit to make sure that the business you're working on is really, really great and has strong, solid potential. Not in my eyes, not in your friends and family's eyes, in the eyes of the only people who matter, the people who are going to be your customers. So step one in the process, customer discovery. The most important rule in customer discovery is another one that entrepreneurs hate. You are not selling, you are listening. I show my product to a lady in Starbucks to get her feedback, and she says, well, it's not for me. As an entrepreneur, my natural, well, did you see it does this, and it also does that? Did you see this really cool feature over here? That's selling. You know what I'm saying? Well, why don't you like it? What's not interesting? Are there other products similar to ours that you like more? Tell me why. You're trying to get your customers to design your product, your marketing strategy, your channel strategy for you by telling you where they would like to buy your product, what they think is a fair price for it, how you would get their attention. Is it a blog? Is it only from a friend? Is it a big billboard, in the square? Let the customer tell you whether your hypotheses are right or wrong. Discovery never ends. That's the other bad news in my message to you. Ask the people at Groupon or RIM, BlackBerry, two of the heroes of the last decade. They declared victory way too early, figured they didn't need to talk to customers anymore because they had great IPOs and so on and so forth. There's now a Groupon on Groupon where you can get a share of Groupon stock for 90% discount from the IPO price. They stopped talking to their customers. They didn't find out that the customers were getting too many offers, too many coupons, too confusing. And the retailers who were using the coupons hated the customers and weren't making any money on the Groupons, and the business has collapsed right at their feet. So you keep on doing this. And when your customers tell you something in enough numbers, when enough customers tell you, I don't like those features, I would never pay that much for it, it's got to run faster, it's got to be different color. When you hear that consistently from customers, it's time to pivot. Now, in Russian, pivot means drink beer. I hope it doesn't mean drink beer in Polish as well. Pivot is a dramatic change to your business model. Not necessarily throwing out the whole business, but changing one box or another box in the business model canvas and going out and testing it again to see if that works better. You're changing your business without a crisis. Those of you who have worked in large companies know how pivots happen in big companies. A bunch of executives get fired, and a bunch of new executives come in and they say, well, they fired the last guy, so I probably shouldn't do what he was doing. What should I do instead? And everybody spends all their time at the coffee pot talking about what to do, how is life going to be, and so on and so forth. In a startup, you pivot proudly. We screwed up. This pricing doesn't work, this idea doesn't work, this marketing plan doesn't work, let's try another one. Small scale, minimum spending. Let's see if that one works better. And if that one doesn't work better, you do it again, and you do it again. And many of you will hate this, because what I'm really telling you is don't launch your product for 6 months, 9 months, sometimes 18 months, until you know that every element of your business is right, not just the product. To me, the most brilliant thing about Osterwalder's 9-box canvas is it reminds every one of you in this room that the business isn't just the product. It's the channel you sell it in. It's the partners who help you sell it. It's the resources you need. It's the cost structure. It's how you're going to get your customers. That's a business. A product with blue knobs and green this and LED digital super speed readout, that's a product. It doesn't mean it's a sustainable, repeatable, profitable business. And you make these pivots quickly. You make them on incomplete information because you're a startup, you're an entrepreneur. You have to move fast because you're fighting the #1 startup enemy, the bank balance, which every day is getting closer and closer to zero. But you still should not rush to sell a few just in case, we need a little bit more money. I see about 1,000 startups a year up close in this wonderful job I have, where I spend all my time traveling around the world talking to bright entrepreneurs like yourselves. I have only excused one startup out of the last 1,500 from talking to 30 or 40 or 50 customers. They went out on their first customer discovery mission to talk about the problem of warehouse automation. They made 4 customer discovery visits. The first one said, "We've heard enough. We've known your company for a long time. We absolutely agree this is a huge problem for us. Stop talking, go back and give us a contract, and let's do it." And they heard that 4 times in a row. These were $200,000 to $1 million contracts, US dollars. 4 in a row, and the guys came to me and they said, "Well, Professor, what do we do? You told us we had to talk to 50 customers." I said, "Wait a minute, aren't you guys entrepreneurs? You have 4 people trying to give you money? Don't listen to me. Get your ass out there, get the contract signed, and learn with your customers." And they have built that in 18, maybe now 20 months into a $17 million, very profitable business that is as scalable as the Swiss Alps. It can be a huge business throughout South America. So let me give you one example. I can't do a talk like this without at least one good Steve Blank story. Steve and I go back 20 years. His 8th startup was a client of my 7th startup. Our wives got to like each other, and that's the secret of a 20-year friendship. And anyway, so Steve's 8th company, Epiphany, at the peak of the internet bubble, Epiphany was worth $400 a share, or $8 billion US dollars, all because of one pivot. Steve was the marketing founder. His partner Ben, the technical co-founder, went on their 9th sales call to Charles Schwab, the online financial services company that was #1 in the United States. They had an in there, so they had told all of Schwab's competitors that Schwab was just about to buy the Epiphany software, which was a robust enterprise data mining tool set that would gather all the information about your customer from the sales database, the service database, the finance database, the marketing database, etc., pull it all together and create a marketing campaign for that one customer. And they thought, wow, for all these online financial services companies, that'll be our #1 market segment. And that's what they told the investors, and that's what they went after. And so Steve and his partner handled Schwab themselves, And the other salespeople were calling on all the other companies saying, we're going to sign Schwab any day. And they went into the meeting, the 9th meeting, and they basically got thrown out because Epiphany didn't have a feature that Mary Kelly, the vice president, said was absolutely critical for their business. It's a feature called data householding, where if Bob Dorf and Fran Dorf live in the same house, they make investment decisions together. But if you looked at Fran Dorf's Charles Schwab account, it's got mutual funds and very safe bonds and cash. If you look at Bob Dorf's Charles Schwab account, he's got all kinds of crazy internet stocks, startup stocks, wild stuff. If you can't talk to them as one household, you can't do smart marketing. And so Mary said, basically threw him out and said, come back when you have householding. And Steve and his partner, my God, we raised $18 million in venture capital. We're dead. We're out of business without Schwab. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? And Ben, the engineer, who sort of, like most engineers, very introverted, barely talks, doesn't say anything for the first 25 minutes of the car ride. And then Steve said, come on, Ben, we're almost back to the office. What are we going to tell everybody? He says, tell them to read page 6 of the product spec. Steve says, what do you mean? The product spec is 5 pages. Ben sits back and smiles and says, not anymore. By the end of the day, page 6 said data householding. They got the Schwab account, they got the JP Morgan account, the E-Trade account, and went on to an $8 billion IPO. Nobody got fired, nobody got yelled at. The founders were there to hear how important this was to a very important customer, and as founders, they were empowered to make the decision to change their business overnight, to throw out hundreds of thousands of lines of code, and to write tens of thousands more lines of code to get the Schwab business and to turn it into an $8 billion company. You have to do this again and again, and you have to do it with speed and agility and with making decisions based on imperfect data. I'm going to skip this, and then you get to move on to customer validation, to test, and gradually spending a little money, then a little more money, and a little more money to make sure all of this still works. And it always comes back to, is this a repeatable, scalable, profitable business model? Well, for most of you, that means going beyond the Polish borders and thinking about not necessarily today, but fairly soon. How am I going to sell the rest of Eastern Europe, and then Western Europe, and then the US and Asia, and so forth? And as these things don't work, you go back to the beginning and you start again. And it's not a failure, it's not a defeat, it's a learning. Better to have this learning before you have spent every investor dollar, because at that point, the accountants fire your ass and bring in somebody else, or they shut down the company and fire you and all of your friends. And that's why startups aren't run by accountants. I don't know how many of you know who Alfred P. Sloan is. People think of him as the founder of General Motors. In actual fact, he wasn't the founder at all. He was the first hired gun CEO, where the board threw out the founder and said, my God, this company is getting so big, we may have actually scored a success with our investment. How can we have this crazy founder around to screw it up? Let's get a serious grown-up accountant in here to start to manage it like a business. So they fired Billy Durant, who was a horse and buggy manufacturer in Flint, Michigan, and the first time he saw one of those horseless carriages making all kinds of smells and noise coming down the streets of Flint, he went out and he sold all his buggy companies quickly and started buying engine companies and axle companies and wheel companies, and he assembled what we know of today as General Motors. And when they brought in real capital to expand the business, very quickly the board said, we can't have this crazy entrepreneur in this crazy hat. running this big successful company. It was okay when we weren't sure it was going to make it, but now we're pretty sure. Let's get him out of here and let's get an accountant in here. So the board fired Billy Durant. Did Billy go home and cry? Did he spend his money on yachts and women? Well, he probably spent some of it on that, but he spent most of the money he made on General Motors buying another company. He met an auto engine maker named Louis Chevrolet, and he bought almost all of the Chevrolet company, turned it into a car company, not just an engine company, took it public, and used the proceeds of the IPO to buy General Motors and fire the board of directors that fired him. All right? Here we have an accountant, died rich, honored, and famous. Here we have an entrepreneur, Billy Durant, dies penniless, managing a bowling alley in Flint, Michigan. The accountant, this is us, crazy, passionate, hardworking, ballsy entrepreneurs. I wish you all the best. It's been a thrill to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this lovely speech. Thank you. Bob stays with us for the whole day and he will sign his books. So please, proszę, żebyście Państwo, to powiedziałam, że Bob z nami jeszcze zostaje dzisiaj cały dzień i wieczór. Będzie podpisywał swoje książki, więc można z nim także porozmawiać. Ja się dowiem dokładnie, w której strefie te książki będą umieszczone i Państwu za chwileczkę powiem. Thank you so much. Whatever I say. Thank you so much.